All right, aloha everybody. Oh, come on, a little louder. I have the honor, or I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, to be the last talk of the conference and right before lunch. So I'm going to try and make this short and sweet. I'm also going to digress a little bit and do something a little bit different in that I'm going to talk more about my journey in experiential learning, because I could go many ways with this talk. I was working on it. I was like, oh, I can do the, this was our problem. These are the methods that we did to address the problem. These are the outcomes. But really what I realized, and to make it transferable to you guys, is the process of implementing new experiential learning projects in your program, that there's a trial and error part of it. And there's a whole experiential part of applying these hands-on learning projects. And you don't, it's that process of getting them into your programs. So experiential learning, we've heard a lot about it. Almost everybody knows about the benefits of hands-on learning and why we do it. And basically, to sum up, it's learning by doing, right? But there's also the other part, teaching by doing. And for me, does anybody know what this picture is of? A square-foot garden. So before I was a Master Gardener coordinator, I was teaching a horticultural principles class at a community college. And basically my mentor, the teacher before me, she had established these square-foot gardens for the class. So during the class, the students had to set up these square-foot gardens. They had to pick out their seed, they had to design them, and they had to maintain them throughout. And as I was teaching the class, I remember being really nervous about it, the amount of work to kind of prep. And but then I found, as I was teaching the course, that my favorite time during the class was when we got to break from the lecture and go out to our square-foot gardens, and I could engage with the students. I could have conversations with them. And I would, the gardens became a personal experience for both them and myself. I'd talk about the plants that they chose. Why did you choose that plant? Oh, well, this was my grandmother's favorite plant, so I'm planting it in honor of her. Or this was in my auntie's garden. She always used to cook with it, so I'm putting it in here. There were stories involved with these gardens. And I found that I really enjoyed that interaction. And it made my teaching more fun. I realized I definitely liked doing this a lot more than standing up and giving a lecture, even though there's less control with this, right? Here, when you're doing hands-on learning, you're kind of surrendering. You have to surrender a certain amount of control over how the lesson is going to go, and you kind of have to be able to accept how it's being received and how they're interpreting it. So that fast forward to about 3 years ago, where I started as the Master Gardener coordinator on the island of Maui. And I knew right away, I'm gonna do those square-foot gardens for our Master Gardens. We are fortunate in Hawaii, of course, that we can grow year-round. So our Master Gardener training course runs from January to May, so I do 20 weeks. And we basically have a Wednesday out of every week, and typically the classes are 4 hours. And I was like, there is no way I can have them sit in the classroom for 4 hours learning stuff. That's just going to be exhausting. So I really wanted to introduce some type of hands-on component that could keep them engaged. And I remember getting overwhelmed thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can come up with a hands-on component for every single topic that we do. What is an underlying experience that they can have that will tie in everything and engage them? So these were the things that I really wanted to achieve with my hands-on learning experience. And let's see, can you turn that way? I can, thanks. So provide a garden journey experience. So just to preface a little bit, one of the things that it's probably unique to Maui, but maybe in also other places as well, is that a large portion of the Master Gardeners that we get signing up for the course are actually not from Hawaii. They're transplants. So they're people who are retiring. They've made their money on the mainland, or they've done their careers on the mainland, and then they're retiring in Maui. And many of them were gardeners on the mainland. They enjoyed gardening. And when they came to Hawaii, they had this idea of, oh, it's a tropical paradise and I can grow whatever I want all year long. And then when they get there, they quickly realize that the gardening isn't the same and that there are unique challenges, just like we all experience. There's going to be unique challenges in new environments that you're planting in. So part of me was wanting to come up with something where they could engage in this new beginning together. They're new arrivals. How do we create that sense of community and sense of place? You know, Hawaii also has a lot of you know, culture associated with it as well. And so I wanted a place where we could bring all of that together. And also give them an opportunity to try new plants. There's things that you can grow in Hawaii that you can't grow in other places. Or maybe there's things that we could grow in the garden that you may not be willing to try at home, whether it be for space or you just don't have the capacity to do it. This would be an opportunity where you could explore all those different options. And to make it kind of transferable maybe for those programs here on the mainland where you don't have those growing seasons all year long, you could maybe transfer this to a smaller component like a container garden or doing some hothouse stuff where you have them actually engaging in growing things that they've never grown before. Because I feel like Pam mentioned, everyone comes with their own gardening experience. And it's, you know, as Master Gardener training, I want to kind of get them to think, well, there's other people who garden other ways, and they're going to be coming to us for advice, and we need to have an understanding of what it's like to grow those things as well. And of course, to integrate, you know, the things that we're learning in the class and reinforce them in the garden. So for the rest of the slides, what I want to talk about, I basically did this learning garden. I started in year 1, and I've been repeating it year 1, year 2, and year 3. And so I just wanted to go over kind of what my experience was with this process of trying to establish a learning garden. I'll also say that I'm sure, as maybe some of you may remember, when you first became an extension agent, there's not a lot of time. So I knew that I wanted to do a hands-on learning project, but I didn't really have the time to learn about hands-on learning or how to implement a curriculum. I just was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to jump in. And so this is kind of my journey in doing it. So learning garden year 1, jumping in. I was just like, we are going to do it. But my resources were limited. When I was a lecturer for the community college, I had a TA, I had a field technician. I had none of those when I started here. So I basically had to scrounge up some resources and make do with what I had. So it wasn't exactly perfect for what I wanted to do, but we did get some gardens set up. And basically the basic setup that first year was I usually have between 30 to 40 trainees that start the class. So we had five beds. They were maybe, they ranged in size 5 feet by 8 feet. Some were 4 feet by 6 feet. They were legacy ornamental gardens that I kind of modified, and I had to kind of cockroach drip irrigation from other places and put them in. And so then I divided up the Master Gardener trainees into groups. So there would be about 5 or 6 of them per planting bed. Very successful. I got good feedback that, you know, they enjoyed planting, you know, they had fun. You can definitely see in this last picture here that we had a pretty diverse and lush and well-producing garden. They were able to harvest things. What's nice about having this garden is I also have them grow a diversity of stuff so they can easily start harvesting radishes at the beginning and lettuce, and then the tomatoes and other fruits like eggplant come on towards the end. So they're always harvesting through there. But some of the takeaways, so I'll start with the good because this was a good year, was that we were able to use existing resources, match activity to capacity. I felt like I only did what I could do. So I didn't extend myself too far. I was kind of, you know, I felt that I did that okay. The Master Gardener trainees told me that, yes, we were exploring, they discovered new plants. They appreciated the new cultivars and, you know, maybe new plants that they wouldn't have thought to grow in their garden. And then they were also challenged, which was another goal that I really wanted to have them see, is like all the different pests and diseases that you can encounter growing some of these different things. Some opportunities to improve. I kind of, because it was my first time, I just was free reign. You guys can grow whatever you want. If you wanted to, you know, I provided them with seeds and I provided them with guidance, but I basically let them grow whatever they wanted. And what ended up happening is there were some plants that I realized were probably not appropriate for this type of garden. We had one person that went crazy with the zucchini. And did anybody notice that there's like, there's one that, and you can see it's starting to encroach on the sidewalk, right? So that got a little bit crazy. And then there was another one that all he planted was tomatoes. And that, you know, it was kind of like, no, we need more diversity. So I realized they're going to need more guidance, need more structure. It's always kind of trying to find that balance. Time. You know, Pam talked about the time to reflect and really reflect on the hands-on activity that you're doing. I didn't factor in enough time for this learning garden. What happened was I kind of treated them like the students in my Principles of Hort class, in that I gave them some time at the beginning to establish their gardens, but after that it was like, well, you got to maintain it either before class or after class. And that did not work. And so what happened was there wasn't equal participation. There were some that really enjoyed the gardens, and so they were willing to take care of them. But a lot of people just say, hey, oh, I see that so-and-so is taking care of our garden, so I don't need to participate. So trying to get equal participation. And then the interesting thing happened, because I also didn't have time to really engage with them in the garden, because it's like I felt like I was running around kind of with a chicken with her head cut off that first year, and dealing with irrigation issues. Irrigation equals irritation. What I found was that there was some competitiveness going on between the groups. And I remember one group complaining to me that another group had stolen something of theirs or whatever. And I was just like, and they kind of became cliquey, and I was like, okay, well, this is not desirable. I don't want this. I want this to be a more like welcoming learning environment. They're all sharing, you know, and they're coming together and they're interacting in a positive way, not in a negative way. So that led me to year 2, and in my typical fashion, I decided to go kind of the opposite way, right? The pendulum swings. I went free reign the first year, so the second year I reined them in. I limited selection. I was so irritated with the irrigation that I said, we are just doing rows, and it's just going to be straight up irrigation. I'm not going to do anything complicated. But what happened was with this class, there were a lot of issues with this class, but I'm going to start with the opportunity to improve, because it was a hard year. Gardening is not farming. So gardening, what I wanted to do was create a sense of place and a sense of ownership and responsibility. And what happened with the farming, and plus because this year what I decided to do was get rid of the groups. I'm not doing groups because I don't want to deal with that infighting again. But what happened with not having groups and giving them these rows to plant is that nobody took ownership of it. They didn't care about it. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna grow a row of tomatoes, a row of corn, a row of lettuce. Plus we had way too many lettuce, way too many tomatoes for anybody to consume. It just didn't have the same feel of a garden. And so nothing against farming, but I think going too broad in scale really brought home that we needed something more intimate. And of course, there's the tragedy of the commons, if anybody's familiar with that, right? When you have everybody sharing something, then nobody cares about it, right? So it's basically needing to provide some sense of individual or individualness to the garden to make them feel like they have some ownership and responsibility over it. And then connecting course content with, connecting the process with the content. This was something that I was continuing to work on from the first year, is really making sure that what we're doing in the learning gardens is complementing or enhancing what we're doing in the classroom. And that meant some effort from me, right? It means that I have to really think about what are we going to talk about in the learning gardens today, or what are we going to do in the learning gardens today that's going to relate to what we're doing in class. The one good thing from this class that, you know, I took away was I had one volunteer say, well, it's okay, we're learning from your mistakes. And, you know, part of me was like, wow, I could really be like, I could, you know, take that personally. But I said, you know what? It's kind of like with kids. We're an example for them. How do we handle mistakes? How do we handle when we don't do things right or things fail? And so what I did was I tried to find the silver lining as much as I could, take the opportunity to say, yep, we planted a row of corn. Nobody took care of it. It's a nitrogen hog. It didn't get the nutrients it needed. Now it's covered in mealybug and all sorts of pests. But look all the bugs we can identify here, all the insects we can identify here. So I swallowed some humble pie, and I moved on to year 3. I think I got it right on year 3. Yeah, the 3rd year was a charm. There's still, of course, fine-tuning. The thing with the hands-on learning experience is what I'm finding is that there's always going to be something new and something different that comes up. I mean, that's also just the nature of gardening. There's always going to be, you know, maybe a disease that you have one year that you don't have the next, or a pest that's, you know, going to be a problem. But really, some final thoughts on this was I changed the setup. Going back to that individual gardens, you can kind of see here, they were all in rows. I set it up so that the irrigation still was not as much of an irritation, and everything worked. But I gave them a sense of ownership with their gardens. Some final thoughts here. Mistakes are instructive for both the teacher and the student. We need to get comfortable with making mistakes and letting them happen, because that is how the learning process happens. Keep your hands-on experience open and be able to adapt for change. Embrace those unexpected outcomes and unintended consequences, like, you know, your tomato crop getting mosaic virus and there's no tomatoes available and it smelled horrible. And then balance guidance with the freedom of choice and expression. Allow them to inquire, explore, but adequately guide them so they don't feel lost and they don't feel overwhelmed. Those first 2 years, one of the main feedback was like, I loved the learning garden, but I wish you had provided a little bit more instruction about, you know, some things that we could have done differently. Not that they wanted me to tell them what to do, but just to give them some insight and some ways to bounce things off of me about, you know, how should they address a certain problem. And so that leads right to the next one, is provide that opportunity for trainees to reflect. This doesn't necessarily need to be them, right? Have them do that. I just would have like a meet and greet in the morning. I'd be like, okay, so, you know, what did you guys pick from the garden today? Did anybody encounter any particular problems? You know, and just kind of have a conversation with them so that they could reflect back to me what was going in their gardens. And then, of course, let their individuality shine through in these group activities. A lot of times when we try and do group activities, or, you know, we're thinking communally, we have to still allow for that individuality to shine through so that they will take responsibility and they will, you know, feel that they are valued for their individual contribution. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.